Good morning again, and we begin this morning with the White House Chief of Staff, Denis McDonough. Mr. McDonough, thank you so much. Happy Father's Day to you. You're a father of
three. Thank you very much, Bob. It's the best job I'll ever have, as the President said the other day, and it's a great pleasure to be with you. Happy Father's Day to you as well.
Thank you very much. Let's start with the news here, and that is these National Security Agency disclosures about whether Americans' privacy has been invaded. This morning in the Washington Post, Barton Gellman, who will be along later this morning on this broadcast, has a big front page story about government officials, and he just underlines that this is something that's been going on for a long time. They've been worried about National Security Agency encroaching on Americans' privacy. Back in 2004, two officials at the time, the acting Attorney General, James Comey, and the FBI Director, Mueller, threatened to resign because they thought the surveillance was being done, that they were intruding on privacy. They didn't. But I must say, Mr. McDonough, a lot of what that story underlines seems very much like what we're hearing about today with these disclosures by Edward Snowden. So let me just ask you to start. Do you have any comment on this story that Bart Gellman has this morning?
I saw the Bart Gellman story, and he's obviously worked on this over the course of the last couple of weeks pretty aggressively. I will say that much of what he was reporting on was a draft Inspector General report about a program that was suspended now several years ago because of the way we saw its usefulness. That's point one. Point two, you mentioned Jim Comey, who was the Deputy Attorney General at the time. He's recently been considered among many other people for a lead job by President Obama, to include potentially as FBI Director. It's precisely because of his views on things like surveillance that I think he's come to the President's attention. Three, let's take a minute and step back. The debate in 2004, 2005 was about a program that did not have any congressional involvement, did not have any judicial oversight, and frankly did not have any of the internal administration-based checks and balances that we have today. When President Obama came into office in 2009, after being elected in 2008, he was pretty skeptical about the importance of these programs. So he took a very hard look at them. And as a result, we changed many things about how we oversee those programs. Congress now is much more robustly involved in these programs. You'll hear that from your next guest. Not just the intelligence committees, but also the judicial committees, and every member of Congress has been given a classified white paper to review, to take a look at these. So part of what you see reflected in the Bart Gellman story is part of what the President was reacting to when he made fundamental changes in how we oversee these programs.
Well, let me just get you on the record here now. Does the President feel that he has violated the privacy of any American?
He does not.
You feel that that has been taken care of. You know, I think back to what Ronald Reagan used to say, trust but verify. But in this situation, it seems to me the government may be asking us to trust it, but they can't verify why we ought to trust it in some cases.
Well, I think you'll hear the President talk about this in the days ahead, Bob, and you'll hear him say again what he said in his speech earlier this month at the War College at the National Defense University. You hear what he said when he responded to reporters last week on this question, which is we do have to find the right balance, especially in this new situation where we find ourselves with all of us reliant on internet, on email, on texting. So we find ourselves communicating in different ways. But that means the bad guys are doing that as well. So we have to find the right balance between protecting our privacy, which is sacrosanct in the President's view, and protecting the country from the very real risks and threats that we face. So what the President's not saying, and this goes to the heart of the changes he made in 2009. The President is not saying, trust me. The President is saying, I want every member of Congress on whose authority we are running this program to understand it, to be briefed about it, and to be comfortable with it. That's why we've done things like we did in 2009 and 2011 by presenting a classified white paper, inviting every member of Congress, 535 members of them, to see that piece of paper, to study it, and to come to us with questions. Congress has authorized these programs now in very robust debates. And those debates are to their credit. But at the end of the day, it was bipartisan majorities that enacted these. And lastly, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court the FISA court, looks at all these programs on a very regular basis to make sure that they comport with the law, that they comport with our standards and our values. And throughout this process, we have independent audits that are conducted by inspectors general and by the Department of Justice at NSA to make sure that this is being conducted in a way that stands up to our values. To be honest with you, I think if Bob Mueller and Jim Comey, who were having that conversation in 2004, could see what would transpire over the subsequent several years, they'd be very comfortable with the programs that we're running today, and in fact, both of them are.
Let me move on to Snowden, the leaker. Do you know where he is, and do you have any indication that he is cooperating with the Chinese or any other foreign power?
I'm sure you'll understand when I tell you I don't want to get involved in any ongoing investigation or any kind of effort that's being undertaken, but I can tell you that I don't know where he is right now.
Former Vice President Dick Cheney said this morning, quite simply, that he is a traitor and that he was engaged and has committed crimes and he has caused enormous damage. Yeah. You think he's a traitor?
You know, I'm not going to front run any investigation that's ongoing here. We're going to be very careful about that. I'll tell you what I worry a little bit about. I worry a little bit about some of the hyperbole that now is being thrown around from him and from others involved in this debate that would somehow cast a pall on the intelligence community and the very dedicated and patriotic people who go to work every day in the intelligence community worldwide, many of them putting their lives on the line to protect Americans.
Are you saying to me this morning that the government's done nothing wrong here?
You know what? I'm not saying that. I'm saying that if there's problems, we're going to get to the bottom of them, as we have on any number of these other issues. But we're also recognize that the president recognizes more than anybody that he has a fundamental obligation to the American people, and that's to keep them safe. But he also swore an oath to uphold the Constitution. He believes that we can do both. He believes that we are doing both, and he's proud of the work that we've been able to undertake to do that.
Some of these claims that Snowden made, he claimed, for example, that he could listen in on anybody's conversation, including the president's, if he had the phone number. Did he overstate his ability to do these things?
It's surely my view that he did.
How else did he overstate?
You know, it's hard for me to go back into each of the puts and takes of his statements, and over the course of time that will get adjudicated. But I can tell you, as we take a step back again and look at the programs that we are running, authorized by Congress, overseen by Congress, briefed aggressively to every member of Congress, subjected to regular oversight from the independent courts. What does that tell you? That tells you that all three branches of government, to include aggressive internal checks inside the administration from inspectors general and routine audits, is overseeing how we do these programs. I think that the American people can feel confident that we have those three branches looking at it. Now, that said, Bob, the existence of these programs obviously has unnerved many people.
How much damage did he do?
Well, let me get to the damage in 1 second. But the president welcomes a public debate on these questions because he does say, and he will say again in the days ahead, that we have to find the right balance. We have to strike the right balance. And we will not keep ourselves on a perpetual war footing, as he said in his speech at the National Defense University. Now, how much damage did he do? Fact is that time will tell. But in effect, by putting these things out there the way he did, rather than having a kind of the robust public debate we'd like to have, in the manner we'd like to have it, in effect gives a playbook to those who would like to get around our techniques and our practices. And obviously that's not in our interest in the long haul.
You're going to prosecute him?
Again, I'm not going to get ahead of the investigators on this.
Big developments overseas. I want to talk about that. Iran elected a new president who's moderate, but at the same time, the London Independent newspaper reports today the Iranians plan to send 4,000 troops to Syria to help the Assad regime. Can you tell me anything about that?
I haven't seen the report, so I can't comment on that. But I can say that, obviously, notwithstanding the very difficult circumstances the Iranian people went to the polls under, lack of press freedom, lack of transparency, harassment in many cases, I think we should all be quite proud of the way that Iranians turned out to vote and to express their democratic views and aspirations.
So you see this as a hopeful sign?
I see it as a potentially hopeful sign. I think the question for us now is, if he is interested in, as he has said in his campaign events, mending his relations and Iran's relations with the rest of the world, there's an opportunity to do that. If he lives up to his obligations under the UN Security Council resolutions to come clean on this illicit nuclear program, he will find a partner in us, and there will be an opportunity for that. But to get to that point, we need him to live up to the obligations on the nuclear program. And if he does, I think there's a great opportunity for Iran and the people of that storied country to have the kind of future that they would think justifiably want.
The White House announced last week that we now will give some arms help to the Syrian rebels. Just overnight, Egypt's president says Egypt is now ready and wants to see a no-fly zone over Syria. Are you going to now go back and rethink whether you ought to do more now? As you're seeing this kind of reaction from the Arab world, that maybe we should do more than just small arms or whatever it is we're going to send in
well,
there?
Again, I don't think we've gotten into the kind of the individual puts and takes. What we have said is that the scope and scale of our assistance, which has been robust heretofore to the Syrian Opposition Council, as well as to the Syrian Military Council, actually the fighters on the ground, that assistance will expand. The scope and scale of that assistance will expand. Why are we doing that? We're doing that because we want to make sure that Syrians who want to take charge of their own country have the ability to do that. We want to make sure that they have the cohesion and the capabilities to work together with their colleagues to have the kind of future for Syria.
Will we oppose other governments if they try to put heavier weapons in there, like, say, anti-aircraft guns and things that might be turned against American people?
Well, obviously, we're going to make sure that one of the reasons that we're doing the extensive efforts that we have done in terms of understanding who the opposition is to make sure that we can coordinate with our friends and our allies. And there's many neighbors in that area who obviously have significant concerns about what's going on. Here's what we won't do, though, Bob. We have to be very discerning about what's in our interest and what outcome is best for us, and the prices that we're willing to pay to get to that place. We've rushed a war in this region in the past. We're not going to do it here.
One other quick foreign relations question. North Korea asked the United States yesterday said they'd be interested in direct high-level talks. Will we take them up on that?
I saw the statement, and obviously we've always been quite clear that dialogue is our preferred outcome here, and in fact we have some ways of talking to them and have exercised that in the past. Here's what I will say, though. Those talks have to be real. They have to be based on them living up to their obligations, to include on proliferation, on nuclear weapons, on smuggling and other things. And so we'll judge them by their actions, not by the nice words that we heard yesterday. I will say that the bottom line is they're not going to be able to talk their way out of the very significant sanctions they're under now, sanctions that Russia supported and, very importantly, that China supported.
Let me ask you about this memorandum that came to light over at the State Department, where it appeared that top State Department officials were trying to quash investigations into some very serious matters, including some very questionable behavior by the ambassador to Belgium. I know you say you don't like to get into the middle of investigations, but should someone accused of some of the things this Belgian ambassador has been accused of, ditching his security and going off to by some reports soliciting prostitutes and things like that? This happened a couple of years ago. Should that person still be on the job there? Shouldn't he be suspended until you find out what exactly happened there?
Well, let me just say, I know that you won't want me to say this, but I will say that we have a golden rule here. I'm not going to get in the middle of any ongoing investigations. That's a golden rule in our White House and, frankly, in White Houses over the course of time. Right. I will say that the president has zero tolerance for abuses of power or malfeasance. And so we'll see what comes out of the investigation, but the president's views on these matters are quite clear.
The Washington Post reported this week the president's trip to Africa may cost between $60 and $100 million. Is that worth it in a time of sequestration when we've got people at various government agencies working 4 days a week, taking a 20% cut in pay because of these severe budget cuts are in effect?
The Washington Post story also said that was the range of price tag that they put on that trip is fully consistent with the kinds of prices that we've paid or the costs that we've paid for similar trips in the past for Republican and Democratic administrations. The question to ask yourself is the one that you've just asked: is it worth it? In Africa, we see many of the fastest growing economies in the world. In Africa, we see many of the best opportunities for us for renewed investment and trade. In Africa, we also see some of the most robust threats and challenges to the United States. And, you know, that it's very important for the President of the United States, as the Commander-in-Chief and as the representative of this government and of the American people, to be able to travel to carry out our foreign policy. Now, on the question of the sequester, is it right that we should just let the sequester sit in place? Absolutely not, Bob. We should not. That's why we have aggressively been reaching out to Republicans and Democrats to underscore the tough choices that you and I talked about the last time I was on your show, that this president is willing to take to try to make long-term investments to return growth and opportunity to the middle class in America. Right now, unfortunately, what we're seeing is too many people in Washington complacent with the status quo. This president is not willing to do that. So if Congress won't work with us on the budget to invest in middle-class families, we'll find ways to do it because it's just too vitally important for us to not make sure that we have the kind of opportunities that middle-class families, like the one you grew up in and the one I grew up in, have had over the course of time.
All right. Well, Mr. McDonough, we could talk all afternoon because there's a lot of news going on, but I really appreciate you coming by this morning, and thank you so much.
I'm happy to be here. Happy Father's Day to you again.
Same
Thanks so
to you,
much.
Dennis.